Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the return of the Slogan of Logan podcast on Renegade Slogan Media. How are y'all doing? Guess what? Liberals are killing Tiny Tims. What's that? Well, I live in the great state of Oregon, and as you all know, for the last several elections, with the exception of the presidency of Ronald Reagan, Oregon has gone blue as far as the presidential election goes, as far as the electorate is concerned. Even though technically every presidential election, it's really close. There's 3 million people living in the state of Oregon, and only 1 million of them vote. And it's always 200,000 votes split between Republicans and Democrats around there. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more, but generally it's the 150,000 to 200,000 mark. Basically, we're outnumbered like 3-1, 2-1. I think I did the math later on in the presentation, as you'll see. And if you watch CNN, or have watched CNN, Louder with Crowder did a 16-hour live stream on CNN. And basically one of their talking points was that Republicans want to kill Tiny Tims. Not word for word, but basically they were alluding to the fact, not necessarily to the fact, they were speculating that Republicans wanted to cut a specific program, and Tiny Tims were gonna die. That's what they called them. That's what they called little kids. So without further ado, Oregon's Child Welfare Agency is headed to trial over a 2-year-old's death. I want to be very clear that Oregon is controlled by the party of Democrats. It is controlled by the Democratic Party. Republicans are outnumbered. There's no libertarians within a mile radius in elected offices. There's no constitutionalists. We just have Republicans who are outnumbered. I want to make that clear. Oregon's Child Welfare Agency is headed to trial later this year in a lawsuit seeking millions in damages for the death of a 2-year-old who died in the care of his stepfather. On Monday, Marion County Circuit Court Judge Donald Abar ruled the lawsuit could proceed despite objections from lawyers for the Department of Human Services and cities of Monmouth and Dallas. Toddler Hayden Henry was found dead in October 2014 after his stepfather repeatedly beat the boy. The stepfather, Richard Tile, pled guilty to second-degree manslaughter for causing Hayden's death. He had a lengthy history of allegations of violence, plus convictions of strangulation and domestic violence in 3 separate cases. Lawyers for Hayden's estate allege that state child protective workers and police in Monmouth and Dallas failed to adequately investigate bruises on Hayden's face and neck in the weeks before he died. Officers from both cities and a state child protective services worker observed Hayden's injuries in the weeks before the toddler's death. Hayden's younger sister, who had also been in Tile's care, now lives with their biological father. Under Carly's law, which the legislature passed in 2007, anyone conducting an investigation who observes suspicious physical injuries on a child must follow a certain protocol. That includes taking photos of the injuries and getting a medical examination within 48 hours. Bruises on the head, neck, and face are on a list of the injuries the state considers suspicious. Carly was a 3-year-old from Corvallis, murdered by her mother's boyfriend. The lawyers for Hayden's estate argued that both the state and police agencies failed to follow Carly's law protocol, among other claims. For example, lawyer Travis Eva said Monmouth police officer Mark Robertson took photos of the bruises around Hayden's neck on October 3rd, 2014, but did not send them to the Human Services Agency. A child welfare worker said during a deposition that the photos from Hayden's first contact with law enforcement would have triggered an investigation, Eva said. So, why am I talking about this story? First of all, this story, the people responsible for this, the father and of course the social workers, handled this completely wrong. Basically, this is a gross mishandling. It is absolutely disgusting. And we're talking about that ratio of Democrats to Republicans. Oregon is a, quote, liberal, unquote, state where fiscal conservatives are outnumbered 5-2. This isn't to say that oh, Democrats are bad, look at that. That's not what I am saying at all. But what I am saying is that we know that if, say, both party platforms, all the politicians on both sides are completely honest, the one that wants to give more power to central governments, to a governing body, happen to be the Democrats, even though conservatives, Republicans, whatever you want to call them, do the same thing, even though they do the same thing. Being speculative here, and I'm putting up a perfect scenario where both politicians follow their platform to a T. But this is just to show that government is a failure. This is a government failure. Now, am I saying, oh, we shouldn't have protections for Tiny Tims? That's not what I'm saying at all. I do think there's a legitimate role for the state government to come in if kids are being abused. Like, physically abused to the point to where, well, they're gonna die. I mean, there's a difference. I don't advocate spanking your children or, slapping them or whatever. But there is an objective difference between slapping your kid, spanking your kid, and having bruises around their neck. Around their neck, or by their neck. Okay? Understand, objectively, there's no way to even try to pretend that spanking and slapping your kids are on the same level of discovering bruises on a child's neck. It's disgusting, it's gross, and how this wasn't taken more seriously, I have no idea. Now, the conclusions I draw from this, which directly relates why I'm talking about it, advocates for government-run healthcare, people. Universal healthcare leads to rationing. I know I just pulled that out of my ass, but why am I saying that? Well, if the government can't even protect one child in a state with only 3 million people, one child with bruises around his neck, and it was passed in state legislature that they have to take this kind of thing seriously, the single person failed to follow protocol and nobody else thought to question him about it. There was no oversight. There was no middleman. It was this one guy screwed it all up. The kid died. Understand that that is the government at work, and there are people out there who advocate for government-run healthcare or universal healthcare. And universal healthcare leads to rationing. Imagine trying to run a service for the entire country or even the entire state. I mean, something as simple as protecting children. And the father, even. What makes it worse is the father had a verifiable history of violence. Let's just say government can't run efficient as it is. I could talk about this story all day. It's time to move on. Could this be the year the death penalty is repealed in Washington State? So, let's talk about the death penalty. Well, hold on. Actually, I'll wait to talk about the death penalty. Let me just read you a bit of the article so you have an idea of what's going on. Just so you understand what I'm talking about. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are optimistic 2018 may bring the end of Washington's death penalty following changes in Senate leadership and years of stalled attempts in the state legislature. Under current state law, individuals found guilty of aggravated first-degree murder can be put to death by hanging or lethal injection. The latest bill would replace that sentence with life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Should it pass, Washington would, a list of other states, have eliminated capital punishment in recent decades. There was a typo in the article. That's why I read that weird. The new chair on the committee overseeing the bill, State Senator Jamie Peterson, a Democrat from Seattle, expects the current push to abolish the death penalty to make it through the Senate and possibly to the governor's desk, the farthest any related bill would have made it in 5 years. Washington's death penalty has been seldom used in recent years. Despite its lack of use, the death penalty remains on the books in Washington. Attempts to match the governor's position in the legislature have stalled in the past 5 decades, despite widespread support. I can't talk, guys. please unsubscribe from me. Despite widespread support among lawmakers for abolishing it, some place blame with prior leadership of the Senate's Law and Justice Committee. Senator Mike Patton, a Republican from Spokane Valley, who has been replaced by Peterson as chairman of that committee, would not grant past death penalty bills a hearing. I don't anticipate I'll be supporting the bill, Patton said this week. Some crimes are so heinous and so brutal that I think the death penalty is appropriate. So here's some conclusions. I 100% agree that some crimes are heinous. It feels like prison is a slap on the wrist for some crimes. I have many personal persuasions that make me want to leave my principles, my key principles. I have a set of principles personally. And sometimes you might have two principles that contradict each other in a certain situation. And I will elaborate on that in a little bit, but let me just say, despite how I think or feel, I must remain consistent and true with my principles, my main principles. Okay, I'm not going to, and the reason is why I'm not going to disavow or even, I don't know, reverse my smaller principle over this one principle is because it could have unintended consequences. I'm not saying that I am a powerful enough person to do something like that, but I believe in limited government. I believe in individualism. I believe people have rights. I don't think government have rights. People have rights, not government. I believe in the right to life as well. So when it comes to the death penalty, I do think that some crimes are so heinous that, this is coming from my emotional side, that some assholes don't deserve to live. If you rape a woman, and you can prove that you have that this person has raped somebody. If you can prove that, I don't think that person deserves to live. I don't think murderers deserve to live. Serial killers, I don't believe that they deserve to live. But there's always the but. I know a lot of people like to make fun of the but if I give the power to the government to take care of these assholes, eventually somebody, if I give the government the right to kill, and somebody who does not deserve that power to kill takes office, that could be very bad. Now, I know it's a big jump from the death penalty for rape or murder to somebody taking over and becoming a dictator of the state or anything like that, but it's an open possibility. Just like restrictions, any restriction, any leeway you give them on your First Amendment or Second Amendment on freedom of speech or your right to bear arms, they will take a mile. You don't even give them an inch, you give them a fraction of a centimeter, and they take a mile. As soon as you give them that, they are gone. So that's my worry. And while I do believe in individual rights, anybody who is murdered has had their rights violated. Same with a rape victim. They deserve justice, and the people that have punished them or that have infringed upon their rights do deserve a punishment. But my basic philosophy of limited government, individualism, and morality for government not getting to choose who lives or dies, and this directly let me finish what I'm going to say first before I go off on a tangent. I don't think it's right, it's politically moral, it's philosophically moral. I just don't think it's moral to give the government the power to kill people. Also, this is directly related to my more pro-life stance on abortion. I lean towards the more pro-life position, and I think I'm being consistent with my principles by taking the anti-death penalty position. Thank you guys for listening to this podcast, and have a good one.